songs and music in the classroom. Let's talk about that. There's are benefits of using music. Now, this class is going to focus on English learning songs for children, and that's a specific genre with specific goals in mind, but using music in general can be quite helpful. So, one, it can help improve concentration. There's been plenty of studies about European classical music and the nice, more calming, peaceful classical music can help improve concentration and can help drown out white noise or drown out background noise, as it were. This can help also, using music can help improve memory. This is using chants, especially. If we remember a rhythm, this can help us remember the words and remember the information. This is a big thing about poetry, especially. If any of you remember the Greek epics like the Odyssey, then that's a long, long, long poem, and the bards, the performers, they wouldn't read it. They had it memorized and they perform it from memory. And they could do this because it's a poem, because it has a rhythm, and that helped them remember what was supposed to be said. Just remembering natural speech, remembering conversation, that's more difficult for humans to do. And so that's why we have things called actors, and their job is to remember words and try to deliver the words in a natural means. Music can also help motivate learning. This is true for musically inclined people. I have a few friends who they studied Korean because they were interested in K-pop, and so that's how they got started, and that helped motivate their learning. My motivation was living in Korea. It's different motivation. But with some people, music can help motivate their learning. It can also be relaxing. And so music can help relax the students, especially if they are coming off a high energy time. Then music can help bring down that energy and help focus on something where they need to sit down and think things through or be quiet. Also, fifthly, music can help learning be fun, as it were. Not for everyone, remember that, but for some people it can be. Not everyone is musically inclined. I played trombone and tuba from elementary school through middle school, and I didn't like it. I like music just fine. I'm just not a musical person. I can't sing. Let's talk about eliciting vocabulary, trying to get the students to say and show what they know instead of just giving them the answers. So when we introduce new vocabulary, students might already know it or be able to provide a simple definition. And so even though the vocabulary might be new to the class itself, it may not be new to individual students. This is very common with English, where you have huge ability discrepancies within single classes. You might have near native or native English speakers with absolute beginners, and it's not a happy situation for either student. So you need to try eliciting vocabulary is a way of seeing what students know and what they don't know. And also, when we elicit vocabulary, it's a way of reviewing what the students remember or might not remember 100%. So this is a way of engaging the students throughout the class and throughout the entire time of the school year. So it's a way of doing that. So let's take a look at some different methods of eliciting instead of just saying things. So easy one, miming, gesturing, using the body. We have a body, it's helpful to use it. So miming, of course, is silent things. So for example, What's that? Well, it's laughing, funny, things like that. In its way of gesticulating in over enthusiastic ways. Miming, it's helpful, it can be. Pictures are another way. Now, on the screen, there are pictures of two different animals. And as we get students to talk about the animals, about what the characteristics of the elephant and the cheetah are, but there's a lot more we can elicit out of them. So, this animal, we know it's an elephant, but what kind of elephant is it? Do you know? Well, there's some different ways we can know. What color is it? Right, and they say gray usually. What are these things? Ears. And so, using different, as we use pictures, we get the students to describe the different characteristics, different parts of the elephant. That this is an African elephant. That they have different. That these are different from Asian elephants. And there's lots of great body parts and colors about how and how they move, how many legs it has, what the nose of the elephant is called, things like that. Using pictures is a great way to review the information that you already taught, or to see how much students already know about what you're going to teach them. This is quite helpful for physical objects. The same can be done for cheetahs, especially when comparing the two. Cheetahs are very fast. Elephants we think of as slow. Cheetahs eat meat. Elephants eat plants. Things like that. Here's a fun one. Which animal is nicer to humans? Turns out, cheetahs are nicer to humans. Elephants, African elephants, are not nice to humans generally. So it's people keep cheetahs as pets. They can live with humans. African elephants don't. They can't. Their personalities are too bad. Another way of eliciting vocabulary, the vocabulary that you want, is to use synonyms, to use similar words. So this is a great way of expanding and reminding students of the expanded vocabulary of what they are learning and what they have learned. So instead of just learning the one word, fast, there's other words that they'll need to learn later, but it's helped to know fast, quick, speedy, instead of just saying good, well, swell, terrible, bad, distraught, those words. Delicious is another one as well. So using synonyms, using similar words to elicit the actual word, the target word. And then, of course, we have antonyms, the opposite word. Clean and opposite of clean, of course, is dirty. Tasty, we can say disgusting. Wonderful, terrible. Fast, slow. This is a great way, and also to help students remember the vocabulary. Remember to pair them up with the positive and the negative. Compare the opposites. Hints are another word you can give. Just giving direct hints, like as if it's a game. You can give them the first letter of the word or the first syllable. If the first letter is C or A, things like that, we can help them as well. Now, this one is new, and it's not in our books, but I think it can be helpful, especially doing over video where we have we can just get sound effects. If you have control over your technology, if you're walking from classroom to classroom to different classrooms, then computers break and files don't always work well together. So I've grew mistrustful of being overly reliant on technology, on using too many things that needed a computer to work. Because a lot of times it didn't work. So I broke it. So I had to become reliant on not using computers as much when teaching, when things weren't in my control. But sounds can be helpful if you're good at making sounds, but that can be a little, if you're good at it. For example, what animal is this? Right, that's a chicken. Hey, what instrument is this? That's right, it's a trumpet. What about this? Now, if you're watching the video feed, you can see for the instruments I also included the pantomime, the miming, which is helpful. Sounds. But with the videos, you can just plug in audio files. For example, hey, do you know what this sound is? What about this sound? Yeah, but what about this? So we can, with the videos, that allows us to edit in more. It's another tool available to us. So that's about eliciting vocabulary. Let's get started. So games should help promote positive attitudes towards learning. The games should be fun. And also games should encourage active participation. You can't play a game passively. That's not how the game works, or any game works in reality. So games should always have these two things. If games bring out negative attitudes, angry attitudes, things like that, then you're going to have to not play games, or you need to radically adjust games. I had classes like that where students were so competitive against each other that it was sorry, I had to take a break real fast. Life finds a way. So we're talking about games and using games in the classroom and using games as a supplement, as a tool of learning. This is something that students are often unaware of how much application of knowledge they actually use in games. So games can be a great way to synthesize the lesson's content and your student's skill in an applicable manner. And then so they learn a skill, they learn the knowledge. Now they need to use it, and that's where the game comes in. And games can come in many different forms. A nice thing about games is that they're fun, so to speak, which is good and bad. So one problem with that is that if something is fun, it can be seen as unnecessary, and students may respond as such, as in they won't actually care, and they won't apply themselves. So, but games are also structured with rules, and humans, along with some other animals like monkeys and things, have a strong sense of fairness, and with that, games are a very nice way to have for students to apply their knowledge. There are two major categories of games: the competitive, student against student, or cooperative, students working together against a goal, to achieve a goal. Sometimes you want competitive games, sometimes you want cooperative games. And so depending on the situation, on the lesson material, on the personality of the students as a group, those are and also sometimes you want to encourage different skills. Sometimes you want students to work individually, sometimes with a group, sometimes working together, sometimes working all together as a big group. And so depending on the skills you want to encourage, or personality traits you want to encourage, you can make competitive or cooperative games. So when can we use games? When can we actually use the games? One, especially in terms of English, in the context of English, using games to practice new language skills or review old ones, that's nice. Games are very nice if you want to do task-based learning, applying giving the students a task to complete, and then they work together or what have you to achieve that task. Games also help to develop memory and concentration ability of the students. That's always nice. Something that is helpful is tell the students why they're playing the game. So if this can help guide and focus their energies on what they're doing. They're not playing the game just to get a piece of candy or the pride or stamps or what have you. Try to include the students and make them more active in their educational process. Make them aware of their education. Here's some overall tips for playing games. Make the game simple. Don't try to overcomplicate it, especially with elementary school students. You probably know the game Mafia. Mafia is a very fun game, but it's complicated. And so you might want to play with a simplified version, especially if you're playing with younger students. Even then, the content matter might be inappropriate for Mafia people. I didn't play Mafia as a child. I played werewolves. Effectively the same thing. They're just werewolves, and it's a medieval village. Games also, you need to get everyone involved. Everyone needs to play the game. Going with what we talked about last time with instructions, giving clear instructions and demonstrating game. Very often, it's a good idea to do one practice game or one practice round so everyone can do and play the game and then play it for real. It's very important that when we enforce the rules of the game, that we are fair. Students can smell unfairness. They hate it. And make sure that you stop the game before students get bored with it. They will get bored with anything eventually, even ice cream. So to go in a bit more detail, here are from our books, the 9 golden rules of using games in the language classroom. Now, these rules can also be applied in other classrooms as well, not just the foreign language classroom, but in others as well, and we'll talk about that. Number 1, the what and the which. And this is very important for you as a teacher to establish what the students are going to learn from the game and which kind of game is best suited to support these learning objectives. What skills do you want to practice? Is that speaking, listening, reading, writing? What do you want the students to exercise with the game? So first, you should choose what you want to practice, what you want to exercise, what skill you want to exercise, and then find a game or make the game that reinforces, that works for your purposes. Don't start with a game and then choose a skill. Decide as a teacher what you want the students to be able to do, and then find the best game for that. Make sure, number 2, suits you, sir. Make sure you need to find the suitable game for whatever the skill that you want to focus on. Also make sure that the game is applicable and suitable for the students' maturity level, for their English skill level, and for their age group as well. In general, back in the old days when I was teaching students, elementary school students, first graders, second graders, third graders, they love to run around and jump around and have very physical games. But older students, 5th grade and 6th graders, they didn't like moving around in the classroom as much. So that was something Simon Says only gets you so far. It's important that you're aware of that, of the personality of the class, of the students, And make sure that your game can be easily explained and understood by the learners, by the players. So even though it might be the best game in the world, Secret Hitler probably not an appropriate game for elementary school students. But it is a very fun game, but it's not something that elementary school students can play. It's something that you can play. This one's very dramatic. Adapt or die. Something that is a bit of a challenge getting student teachers to understand or to accept is that teachers have to adapt the material for the needs of the class, for the needs of the students. It's extra work, but we have to do it. So you will need to change games to fit your class, fit the number of students, to fit their grade level, to fit their skill level, to fit their personality, fit their mood of the time, all those things. Even how long it takes. The obvious example here, like if you want to play a quick game of Hangman, well, if you're playing Hangman, you have to make sure you choose words that they know, or that you hopefully have been studying, things like that. So you might need to make games easier, or you can also make them more difficult depending on the skill level of the students. It is something. For its own preparation, make sure that you have all your things ready when you need to play the game. How much equipment do you need? How much printed papers do you need? Make sure that, and this is hopefully what we should be doing, hopefully you can play the game by yourself before you play it with students, so you know how the game's going to go, how it should go. Because sometimes, especially if it's a game we're unfamiliar with that's in the textbook, sometimes we don't really know if it's a good game or if it's a complete game. Textbooks can be wrong. That can happen. And their activities can be incomplete. That can happen. So please make sure that you're prepared for your game before you play it. And this goes back to making the instructions. Make everything as clear as possible. Try to, as mentioned last week, keep it super simple. Kiss it. If possible, practice giving the directions, especially if you're giving them in English, before you give them to the actual students. And as mentioned last week, it's very helpful to provide, you're giving spoken instructions, but also provide written instructions, and also demonstrate how to play the game. That's also very important. And number 6, this is a very, very important, but depending on the game, this can be difficult. Make sure that everyone plays. Everyone has a chance to play. Speaking. This is very important. If you're playing Jeopardy of some sort or some trivia game, make sure that everyone answers, not the one kid on the team answers, that kid. But make sure everyone takes a turn. So, it could be as simple as after one student answers one question, they can't answer again until everyone answers. So that so everyone gets some practice, some exercise in speaking. So it's something to be aware of. Also, certain games limit the involvement of students. Mafia or Werewolves is a good example. For those of us who might be unfamiliar with Mafia or Werewolves, the notion is that you have a population, a town, as it were, and there's 2 phases. There's a nighttime and daytime phase. And in Werewolves, 2 of the villagers are werewolves, and every night they eat one of the villagers. So the villagers are trying to find and kill the werewolves. And so on the very first night, one of the villagers is going to die. What does that villager do? What does that student do for the rest of the game? Well, in regular play, they would have nothing to do. And werewolves can take, depending on how much they're talking, a complete game might take 20, 30 minutes, maybe longer even. So in that case, Werewolves is a terrible game to keep students active, to keep them playing. Because otherwise, they'll go to sleep, which is not what we want them to do. So there are variations of Werewolves, of Mafia. One variation is called First Night, in that there's only one night of play, and the game only has one turn. It's much more complicated in that one turn, but there's one night, one day, game over, and it moves on from there. So you might need to modify your games to make sure that everyone has a chance to participate and exercise their English muscles. Also, we should make it rewarding. We should end the game on a happy note, like everything. Like we should end a class, a lesson, with a happy note, a feeling of accomplishment and success. Games are supposed to be fun, also. Some people like to give candies. I've grown apprehensive of bribes such as candies. You can, because bribes have a tendency to rise in price. So I try other forms of recognition, things like that, but ending on a happy note. The game can also be a reward in of itself for good behavior, depending on how you are with the class. It is, if possible, also get the students to congratulate each other and support each other. God bless them. They should support each other, their classmates. Be careful of your timing. It is all in the timing. Don't play a game at the wrong time of class or time of day or the wrong day of the week. Otherwise, it might not work. You're not going to schedule a game as the very first thing that you do in the morning. It's not going to work. It's not going to happen. Especially depending on your students. Sometimes, if you're a subject teacher, sometimes it's unavoidable, as it might be, but try not to make it work. Also, try to have your games, hopefully, not take up the entire class period, so you can play it in 20 or 30 minutes. So it is a reward it's a carrot for doing well, for working hard, for succeeding in the regular lessons. The games can support and reward their good efforts. So it's a form of motivation. And also, to go back to it, games can be inspiring, but they're not a panacea. It's important to watch out for boredom, so the students don't get destructive or sleepy, as it were. So it's important to be careful of our sequencing and our timing, that we finish the games before the mood turns bored, before they turn negative, as it were. So we need to be aware of how the mood is in the classroom. So let's look at some different games. This would be very fun if we were actually in person and we could talk about different people's personalities. And I would have a whale of a time, but sadly we're not. There are some kinds of games where the players get out and have to stop playing. So think about, what are those players going to be doing after they're kicked out of the game? What are they going to do for the rest of the game? Simon Says, if you remember, especially dealing with very young students, Simon Says if you follow the wrong command or follow the command incorrectly, you're out. And that, that's discouraging, and the point is to play the game. So one modification is a life system or a man system, as in you get 3 lives and then it's game over. So it's not 1 life, game over. It's not Dark Souls. It's something more akin to Super Mario Brothers. So, or once you die or once you're out, you could have another sub-game for them to play, which is helpful. What I used to do with the Simon Says, after a student got out, they became a watcher, and they helped me find students who made mistakes, and they got their own points for finding the most students who made mistakes. And that helped them pay attention and listen carefully to what the commands were, and so they were motivated to keep paying attention. Something also, be aware of how egocentric your students can be. Some students have a very difficult time accepting that they've lost anything, and they'll cry and get angry. Games can help with this, as in they need to accept that losing is part of life. You can make no mistakes and still lose. That's life. It can happen. It's not failure, it's just life. But sometimes we don't need 30 crying kids at once. It's just it's unsavory. So if you have a lot of very competitive students in your class, then it could be more helpful to play more cooperative games rather than competitive. That a way of focusing their competitive energy to help others rather than to berate and insult others, which can happen with overly competitive students. I've had it happen with me, so be aware of that. Something I've learned, if a rule can be misunderstood by a student, it will be misunderstood. That's just how it will be. Students will misunderstand everything. So that's why it's so important to have simple directions, written directions, spoken directions, demonstrating how you're going to play. Do a practice round when you can. That is all helpful. And make sure that students know what the meta language of the game. It's your turn. You're out. What language do they need to know to actually play the game? Those are all very helpful. Sometimes it's easy to forget what students know and what they don't know.